But on the line with us right now is our old buddy Ralph Nader, who's got a new book out. This is a novel, a fable. It's a funny, it kind of reminds me of, well, actually, there have been a number of them, but this is titled How the Rats Reformed the Congress, a fable by Ralph Nader. Ralph, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's designed to make people laugh themselves seriously enough to organize in every congressional district what I mischievously call Congressional Rat Watchers Group to turn Congress around. It's a lot easier than we think, and we turn Congress around. A lot of the problems on people's minds start being resolved, whether it's the facing up to climate disruption, which you just went through, climate devastation, converting to solar energy and renewable energy, or full Medicare for all, free choice of doctor and hospital, much more efficient, living wage, repairing America's schools, bridges, sewage, drinking water systems, by revamping the tax laws, cutting back on crony capitalism or corporate welfare, and debloating the massively wasteful military budget that's been criticized by more than a few retired admirals and generals. That's what this book's about.
That's a hell of a list, Ralph. That's like, Bernie's 10-point suggestion for what the Democratic Party should do. This is, how are you, what are the priorities that you see that progressives should be focusing on as the Democrats at least take control of the House, and as the Congressional Progressive Caucus now is, if not the largest, the second largest caucus in all of Congress? This seems like a good thing, good start.
Yeah, it deals, Tom, with what I call a platform of long overdue changes and redirections, reforms that affect everybody in this country. And it just happened to have liberal and conservative support. Start with living wage. They've been suppressing the minimum wage for years. 30 million workers make less today than the workers made in 1968, adjusted for inflation. And workers are twice more productive because of automation. They're not getting the gains. That'll pump hundreds of billions of dollars into the economy and make a huge reduction in poverty in this country. The second thing that's supported by increasing numbers of liberals and conservatives is full Medicare for all, and that gives you your free choice of doctor and hospital, and none of these narrow, cruel networks that people are being shoved into, and no more of these computerized billing craziness and overcharges and so forth. We have Canada as an example, a country where people look like us. It works a lot better than the corrupt system here, where some 35,000 Americans every year die because they can't afford health insurance to get diagnosed and treated in time. You can imagine how many injuries and illnesses could be prevented. And then law and order for corporate scams, corporate crimes, rip-offs that you read about in the papers all the time. From payday loan rackets to credit card overcharges to bank penalties to deceptive advertising, drugs that don't work are pushed onto people. That has huge left-right support. And then the big one is reforming Congress, which is what this book's about, how the rats reform the Congress, because that's the entry portal to changing the country. You say, why? Well, first of all, it's the smallest and most powerful branch of government. It controls the appropriations, tax, investigative powers, you name it. Second, it's only 535 men and women who put their shoes on like you and I do every day. And third, we know their names, not some huge federal bureaucracy. We know their names. They want our votes. They come and, engage in flattery and fooling us and flummoxing us because they desperately want our votes, which are more important to them than the money they raise from Wall Street and elsewhere. And we can take control of the Congress. What is the Congress? It has huge amount of our sovereign power. We the people is the way the preamble of the Constitution starts. Not we the Congress, we the corporation. Number two, it has control of the money. And all these taxes that are being subsidizing the tax escapes and loopholes of the rich and powerful can be sent back to community America to deal with the public services instead of funding huge weapon systems we're never going to use, and huge bailouts and corporate welfare from New York to Houston. So those are the beginning ones, and they're very realizable, because my rule of thumb, Tom, and you can, as a historian without peer on talk radio, you, Thom Hartmann, know that every social justice movement we're proud of in this country, every social justice movement never took more than 1% of vigorous citizens in congressional districts linking together, marches, demonstrations, summoning the senators, going to the election, replacing the representatives the senators were needed. And we organized less than 1,000 people in the 1960s to regulate the auto industry, which has saved and averted 3.5 million deaths, among other benefits. So we know what we're talking about. And this book, How the Rats Reformed the Congress, is an attempt to grab people's attention, because there's a rat infestation, by the way, in Washington, D.C., and literally, and there's a rat infestation out of the catacombs under the Congress. And in this fable, they start climbing up the pipes looking for food, and they get in the toilet bowls, and you can imagine the embarrassment of the lawmakers, and they try to cover it up, and a Damon Runyon-type reporter breaks the story. There's a media frenzy, massive derision by the American people. They suddenly pay attention in Congress instead of say, pox on all their houses, I don't want anything to do with them. They turn from indifference to focusing on Congress. Members of Congress are so embarrassed, they start pushing legislation that represents the people's interests for a change. And then various citizen groups start cropping up all over. All the talent that suppressed civic talent in this country starts coming to the forefront, and they just basically develop a whole agenda to change the country for the better with huge public support, massive rallies surrounding Congress, never mind, walking down Pennsylvania Avenue, day after day. The media goes nuts covering it, and in a very few months, the changes are made. History shows if you wait too long for a change that most Americans want, like President Truman recommended universal health insurance, we still don't have it decades later. The corporate lobbyists learn how to game it and delay it and dilute it. Right. And so all this happens in a very realistic way. Once the jolt of the rats wakes the country up, and people can connect with our website, ratsreformcongress.org, where we detail exactly how to form a Congress watchdog group in your district. You can start with 10, 20, 30. You get enough people, you summon the senators and representatives to your own town meetings, your own agenda. You turn the dynamic where they control you, you control them, because you can point to the Constitution, we the people, not we the Congress. So anybody who wants this book or wants a discount, 5 or 10 at half price, you can get the details. Go to ratsreformcongress.org, and also you'll get the playbook on how to organize these things, how to put on press conferences, how to mobilize people. And it never takes more than 1%. 1%, that 2.5 million people.
We're talking with Ralph.
You can do it on a third of 1%.
We're talking to Ralph Nader. He's got a new book out, How the Rats Reformed the Congress. The website is ratsreformcongress.org. Ralph, we're going to hit a hard break here in about a minute and a half, but you just said something that just kind of blew my mind. You said it's never taken more than 1%. I'd always sort of believed in Thorstein Veblen's notion that it really takes about 20% of people in a society to come to a new conclusion to create what he referred to as the influencer class. I mean, this is back in, I think, the 1890s or the 1920s or whenever. 1%. I mean, and then I was thinking about that. Like the Women's March after Trump, that was 1 million people, but we're 300 million people. That was a third of 1%. 1% is enough to actually change a nation. That's
as long as they reflect majority opinion, and there's a lot of majority opinion on all kinds of things. Once you break through the divide and rule strategy of the ruling groups, have known that for 2,000 years, haven't they? How to divide and rule.
Right.
And they divide and rule Americans on certain issues they disagree, like reproductive rights or,
gay marriage,
immigration, etc. But as I put in my book, Unstoppable, the emerging left-right alliance to dismantle the corporate state, There are dozens of areas in this country. Solar energy, massive support. Repairing America, infrastructure, massive support. Cracking down on corporate crooks in Wall Street, massive support. Breaking up the big New York banks that are too big to fail, and then you have to bail them out, you the small taxpayer. Massive support.
Yeah. So, well, in that case, then Thorsten Veblen, that's about how to influence the majority. And now we've got more than 50% of people who want Medicare for all, more than 50% of the people who want comprehensive immigration reform. You know, we could go through the list. And then you only need 1% of activists. That's your point.
That's right. And it basically says to Washington, D.C., don't divide us anymore, liberal, conservative, red state, blue state. We all bleed because of your corruption. We all bleed because you've sold our country to the highest corporate bidders. We don't get ripped off by the insurance companies and the banks and the health insurance industry the same way. You're not going to divide us anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why ratsreformcongress.org, that website, is not only how you can get this book, and it's not that long. It's about 170 pages.
Right.
You'll laugh yourself seriously, and then when you get through half the book, you'll say, hey,
well, if we're out of time, ratsreformcongress.org.